On a late May afternoon, sunlight painted the stone steps of the city hall in shades of gold. The heavy oak doors swung open, and streams of elegantly dressed guests filed inside. The sound of polished shoes striking the glossy floor echoing across the hall. Inside, the stage had been carefully prepared. A red banner stretched across the backdrop. Golden letters gleaming with the words, "The Dorn Scholarship Fund for a Generation Free to Learn." Elowen Crestfield stood backstage, her hands clutching the speech she had written weeks ago. Her heart pounded not so much from nerves, but from pride. The night before, she had barely slept. Partly because little Rowan had woken crying at midnight, partly because of the unnameable excitement bubbling within her. She had always believed education was the only true key to open doors for less fortunate children. And today, this ceremony was proof of it. Her husband Cassian Dorn had agreed to fund a scholarship program dedicated to students who had to fight against hardship. Rowan was staying with his grandmother in the countryside. Elowen hadn't wanted him to be overwhelmed by the solemnity of the event. Still, inside her handbag rested a small blue toy car, her 3-year-old son's favorite. Just holding it made her feel as though he were right there beside her. With his wide eyes and milk-sweet smile, the side door opened and Cassian stepped in. He wore a tailored black suit, a wine-colored tie knotted perfectly, every stride precise, measured. The light caught his sharp, unreadable features. This was the man whose single glance once made Elowen's heart tremble, and the man who had lifted her out of the meager life of a poorly paid schoolteacher. "You all right?" Cassian asked, his deep voice quick, detached. "I'm fine. Just a little nervous, hoping I won't shake in front of everyone." Elowen forced a smile, wishing he would squeeze her hand in reassurance. But Cassian only gave a curt nod, his eyes already drifting toward the packed rows of spectators. He adjusted his cufflinks and said nothing more. A flicker of loneliness brushed against Elowen, but she pushed it aside. Of course he was preoccupied with the event. Tonight, once it was over, they would return home, sit with Rowan, and tell him that they had done something great, not only for their family, but for countless other children. The microphone crackled. The host invited Cassian to the stage. Applause thundered as he strode forward with his signature confidence, a half-smile curling his lips in that effortless, admired way. Elowen watched from behind, her eyes brimming with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cassian began, his voice clear and commanding. "Today we gather not only to award scholarships, but to affirm that the future belongs to those who dare to dream, no matter where they come from." Another wave of applause swept the hall, and Elon's chest swelled with emotion. This belief was why she had fallen for him. Can't said a man of ambition, who knew how to channel it into something meaningful. Then came her turn. "Please welcome Ms. Elowen Crestfield, teacher at Maple Grove Elementary, and wife of Mr. Dorn, to share a few words." She drew in a steadying breath and stepped into the bright lights. They bathed her face in a warm glow. Elowen smiled and bowed slightly. From the stage, her eyes found the first row. Her mother-in-law sat stiffly, lips pressed tight in a forced expression. Her father-in-law clapped politely, though his eyes shimmered with guarded caution. A chill rippled through her, but she went on. "As a teacher, I believe every child deserves a chance to learn," she began, her voice trembling yet firm. "Over the years, I've witnessed too many students forced to abandon their dreams because of their circumstances. Today, your presence here has opened new doors for those children. And for that, I am deeply grateful." She hesitated, seeking Cassian's gaze for strength. But he wasn't looking at her. Instead, he was leaning toward a guest in the front row, exchanging words, a faint, distracted smile tugging at his lips. A cold sting pierced Elowen's chest. Her speech ended to polite applause. She retreated backstage, her heart racing not from stage fright, but from a vague, gnawing dread. In recent weeks, Cassian had been coming home late, his phone always on silent. Whenever she asked, he brushed it off as work pressure. The program continued. Symbolic scholarship certificates, bouquets of flowers, radiant smiles for the cameras. A perfect picture on the surface. Yet within Elowen, unease was growing. As the ceremony neared its close, Cassian was invited once more to the stage. He walked out, this time carrying a gold envelope. The audience hushed, assuming it held the official list of recipients. Elowen thought so too, relief softening her chest. Before we conclude, Cassian said, his tone calm, deliberate. There is a personal announcement I wish to share with you all. A murmur rippled through the hall. Elowen's feet turned icy, as though the ground itself were slipping away. Her eyes locked onto the envelope in her husband's hand. And a terrifying thought flared. No, it can't be. Cassian paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room before it fixed on her, not with tenderness, but with the sharp focus of a man about to deliver a decisive blow. The hall fell into an eerie silence. The low hum of the air conditioner above suddenly sounded louder, mingling with a faint cough from the back row. Every eye fixed on Cassian as he raised the golden envelope. Elowen sat up straight, her fingers digging into her palms until her nails left marks on her skin, as if the pain could anchor her to the belief that this had to be just another scholarship announcement. Maybe he was about to announce an extra donation or the expansion of the fund. She clung to that fragile hope. Cassian's voice rang out, each word sharp and deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, I know today is meant to be a day of hope and new beginnings. But sometimes, to begin anew, we must dare to end what no longer fits. The words dropped like ice into the air. Elowen lifted her trembling gaze toward him, silently pleading, "What are you saying?" But Cassian went on, a thin smile cutting across his face. Inside this envelope, he lifted it higher, is a divorce petition. I choose to announce it today because I believe truth, however painful, must be spoken plainly. Elowen and I have reached the end of our journey together. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Murmurs swelled like waves. Some people covered their mouths, others instinctively raised their phones to capture the shocking moment. Elowen's chest clenched as though crushed by an unseen hand. Her heart beat wild and erratic. She leaped from her chair, striding toward the stage, her voice breaking. "Cassian, what are you doing? This is some kind of joke, isn't it?" He turned, his steel-gray eyes cold and unflinching. "No, Elowen. This is the truth. You know as well as I do that we are not what we once were. And you know why?" A strained laugh escaped somewhere in the audience, then died instantly. Elowen scanned the front row, and her breath caught at the sight of her mother-in-law, Rowena Dorn. She didn't look shocked at all. Instead, she had tissues ready, dabbing her eyes like a woman rehearsing a scene she'd long expected. Beside her, Elowen's father-in-law sat frozen, gaze drifting into the distance as though he couldn't bear to face what was unfolding. A chill shivered down Elowen's spine. Everything felt orchestrated. Had everyone known, everyone except her? Cassian turned back to the audience. "I believe Elowen is a good person, but lately she has been unstable. Outbursts, unfounded suspicions, I've documented them, out of concern for our son. Enough." Elowen cried, her voice cracking. But at that very moment, a flash from the back of the hall caught her eye. Maribel Ashcroft, her closest friend since university, was standing there. Phone raised, lens pointed directly at the stage. Her face bore no sympathy, only the faint curve of satisfaction. Blood roared in Elowen's ears. Maribel knew too. Memories snapped together like shards of glass. Cassian's late nights because of work. Maribel's strangely probing questions about family finances. Her mother-in-law's barbed remark that some women are not meant to be mothers. The pattern was suddenly, painfully clear. The audience buzzed with whispers. "He's so cruel announcing divorce at a scholarship ceremony," one woman murmured. "Maybe he has his reasons." "Look at his wife, she's about to cry," another replied. Elowen stood rigid, her eyes brimming but refusing to let tears fall. She knew, if she broke down now, she would become exactly the fragile, unstable image Cassian was trying to paint of her. Cassian descended the stage and held out the envelope. The papers rustled heavily inside, like stones dropping into her chest. He leaned close. His whisper meant only for her. "You should sign it. This is the best path for us both." Elowen stared into his eyes, and in that instant, she realized the man before her bore no trace of the one who sold her on a winter's night and promised to protect their small family. All that remained was a stranger, cold, calculating, power-driven. Her hands trembled. But in the hollow of her chest, a spark of defiance flickered to life. Surrounded by heavy silence, glaring stage lights, and hundreds of watching eyes, Elowen knew this was not the end. This was only the opening act of a battle she could not and would not lose. The sound inside the hall froze solid. Elowen could hear the frantic pounding of her own heart, as if it were the only sound left in the entire room. On stage, Cassian remained composed, his eyes fixed on the audience rather than his wife. Speaking like a man delivering lines he had rehearsed long ago. "We have lived together for 3 years," he said, his deep voice carrying clearly. "But sometimes the distance cannot be bridged. I believe today is the right moment to announce that we will be ending our marriage." The words fell like a knife. Gasps erupted across the hall. Some people sighed, some let out awkward chuckles. Elowen's legs nearly gave out, and she had to grip the back of a chair to keep from collapsing. "Cassian." Her voice broke, cutting through the noise. "You can't, this is a scholarship ceremony." This is Cassian turned to face her. His gaze was cold, detached. "Elowen, do you think I don't understand what this means? I want transparency before family, friends, the community. No more hiding. But why here? Why in front of everyone?" He shrugged, as if it were nothing more than a practical choice. "Because the most important people are here. I think it's better they hear it directly, rather than through rumors." The words scraped against her heart like salt on an open wound. Elowen's eyes searched the crowd-familiar faces, now blurred between pity and curiosity. In the middle row sat her mother, clutching her handbag with trembling fingers. She had driven over 100 kilometers just to witness what she believed would be her daughter's proudest moment. Now her eyes brimmed with tears. Elowen choked back a sob. "You chose to humiliate me," she said softly, her voice shaking but echoing through the microphone. "Not just to end our marriage, but to trample my dignity." Cassian turned back to the audience, treating her words as if they were nothing more than an interruption. "The hardest part," he continued smoothly, "is our son. Rowan is only 3 years old. I worry about his stability. That's why I have already prepared the necessary steps." Elowen froze, every cell in her body constricting. "What are you talking about?" Cassian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the front row. A man stood and walked up, their private attorney holding a stack of files. "No," Elowen whispered, rushing forward to block the way. "You can't do this." Cassian looked at her, his voice dropping low but still caught by the microphone. "I have a duty to protect Rowan from instability. You know how you've been lately? Sleepless, crying, sudden fits of anger. I've recorded everything, Elowen." For Rowan's safety, a ripple of whispers swept through the hall. Dozens of eyes pierced her, some pitying, some doubtful, others simply curious. Elowen's chest tightened. The weight of knowing that any attempt to explain would only serve as evidence against her in that moment. Her gaze caught Maribel Ashcroft's, her dearest friend, the one who once held her hand on her wedding day. now stood pressed against a pillar, phone raised high. The faint smile tugging at Maribel's lips cut into Elowen like a blade. So it was her too. Elowen wanted to scream, to rip apart every mask around her, but her throat locked shut. One thought drilled through her mind. When did it begin? When he started coming home late? Or when Maribel asked those strange questions about our finances? Cassian's voice rolled on, smooth as glass. I know this is shocking, but I have made arrangements to ensure Elowen will be taken care of in the coming days. As for custody, I trust the court will decide what is best for Rowan. A chair scraped against the floor. Someone left. A man shook his head and muttered, cruel. A woman beside him whispered, maybe he has a point. She does look unstable. Elowen's fists clenched tight. Every word from Cassian tore at the fragile image of family she had tried to preserve. Yet amid the chaos, something fierce began to stir. If he wanted to shame her publicly, she would not hand him the satisfaction so easily. She stepped forward, seized the microphone from the host. Her voice trembled but rang out firm. If you think you're the only one prepared for today, Cassian, then you are mistaken. Cassian froze. Dozens of eyes swiveled toward her. The air thickened, ready to ignite. Elowen gripped the microphone and drew in a deep breath. In her heart, she heard her son's voice echo. Mom, don't give up. And in that instant, she knew this would no longer be just a scholarship ceremony. This would be the place where she began reclaiming her honor, piece by piece. The atmosphere inside the hall grew so heavy that it seemed no one dared to breathe. Elowen stood there, gripping the microphone. Her eyes locked on Cassian as if searching for some last trace of humanity in his gaze. But what she saw was only brazen coldness, something she had sensed for months but tried desperately to ignore. Cassian took back the microphone from the host and stepped forward as though this entire performance had been meticulously scripted. His voice was clear, every word slicing like a sharpened blade. Perhaps many of you are surprised, but I can no longer hide it. Since Rowan's birth, Elowen's mental state has been unstable. Sudden bursts of anger, paranoid episodes, sleepless nights. Panic attacks. I've been patient. I've tried everything to support her, but in the end, I must think of my son's future. A wave of murmurs spread through the audience, half-doubting whispers. Some eyes turned toward Elowen, filled with pity. Others with suspicion. Her chest tightened as if crushed, but her mind screamed, this isn't true. This is the trap he set. Cassian opened the lawyer's briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. He held them high, as if brandishing undeniable proof. This is a log of Elowen's condition over the past 3 months. Her shouting, her crying in the middle of the night. Her irrational conversations, I recorded them all. He raised his head, scanning the hall with a faint, confident smile. If necessary, I can even play some recordings right now. Elowen froze. Yes, there had been nights when she cried herself breathless. Yes, she had accused him of cheating, begged him not to come home so late. But that had been the result of his indifference, of the wall he built between them, not madness. And yet, stripped of context, all of it could be twisted into evidence of instability. You did this? Elowen stammered, her voice hoarse. Cassian turned to her, not a flicker of remorse in his eyes. I had no choice. You can deny it, but the truth is clear. I only want to ensure Rowan grows up in a safe environment. The sound of their son's name ripped her heart in two. Rowan, the 3-year-old, who clung to her neck every morning before preschool. Who begged to hear her voice read bedtime stories each night. Cassian was trying to take him away. Suddenly, her mother-in-law Rowena rose from the front row. Her eyes were red, but her voice was firm. Cassian is right. We, his parents, have witnessed Elowen's strange behavior many times. Can such a mother truly care for a child? The hall erupted with noise. Rowena's words poured fuel onto the fire. Elowen turned to her in disbelief. This was the woman who once held her grandson tenderly in her arms, now using that very image as a weapon against his mother, and to seal the hand he had played. Cassian lowered his voice, but made sure it carried across the hall. I will be requesting full custody. Elowen may have visitation, but only under supervision. I trust the court will agree for Rowan's best interest. The world spun. Elowen clutched the wooden podium to keep from collapsing. Faces swirled before her. Stage lights blazed harshly. Whispers buzzed all around. Some shook their heads with regret, while others raised their phones to capture more of the spectacle. From the back of the hall came a familiar voice, Maribel Ashcroft's. Cassian. Is it really necessary to go into such detail? Her tone feigned sympathy, but her eyes glittered with satisfaction. Elowen saw it clearly now. Maribel was part of this. From the beginning, they had been working together. Elowen stood silent, but inside, a flame began to burn. Every accusation, every piece of so-called evidence, none of it was truth. Only fragments of a scheme Cassian had orchestrated. And if he thought she would sit quietly and accept it, he had gravely underestimated the strength of a mother protecting her child, amid the endless whispers. Elowen placed her hand gently on her lower belly, the place where she had once carried Rowan for 9 long months. No one would take her son from her. No one. She lifted her head, wiped away the sweat and tears from her face, and her eyes hardened with resolve. Cassian closed his announcement with a nod to his lawyer. Everything had been staged to paint Elowen as unstable. But what he didn't realize was that tonight his carefully written play would begin to crack. The scattered applause that followed Cassian's speech felt like misplaced blades. No one clapped with real enthusiasm, but it was just enough to keep the ceremony from sinking into unbearable silence. Elowen stood tucked in the wings, her heart pounding, eyes fixed on her husband. He descended the stage, surrounded by colleagues and longtime friends, his face calm. A thin smile playing on his lips as if he had just announced a new business venture, not delivered a death sentence to their marriage. Elowen wanted to scream, to tear through the crowd and rip off that mask. But her body felt bound in invisible chains. The sharp click of high heels on the marble floor snapped her back to reality. Maribel Ashcroft was approaching, her shimmering green dress sweeping lightly across the tiles, her perfectly painted face glowing under the lights, golden curls swaying with each step. Elowen Maribel's voice carried a note of contrived sorrow, though the glitter in her eyes betrayed her. I didn't expect Cassian to do it this way, but maybe it's for the best. Elowen locked her gaze on her so-called friend, sensing the blade hidden beneath the sugar-coated words. You knew beforehand, didn't you? Maribel faltered only for a heartbeat before curling her lips into a vague, unreadable smile. I only knew he wasn't happy anymore. Elowen, you have to admit lately you haven't been yourself. Elowen's blood boiled. So this was why Maribel had been asking about their finances, her health, her moods. Not concern intelligence gathering for Cassian. Before she could respond, a cold hand pressed onto her shoulder. Rowena Dorn stood there, her eyes glassy with feigned sorrow, her voice steady. Elowen, I know this is painful, but you must understand, mother in an unstable state can endanger a child. We cannot sit by and let our grandson be at risk. Elowen nearly laughed. Rowan is my entire world. Since the day he was born, I have never let him go without, never let him be harmed. And now you dare call me the danger. Rowena shook her head, her expression steeped in false pity. Love alone is not enough. Cassian is only doing what's right. Elowen turned away, unable to bear the sanctimonious gaze. Then, across the room, she caught sight of something that twisted her stomach. Cassian and Maribel standing side by side, shoulders brushing, whispering to one another with the ease and closeness of lovers. The grotesque puzzle snapped into place. An affair, betrayal, and a conspiracy that had been carefully spun for months. In her mind, echoes of her own late-night sobs returned. Maribel's probing questions. Have you ever thought about what you'd do if Cassian wasn't around anymore? At the time, Elowen had mistaken them for concern. Now she understood they had been probes, small daggers preparing for tonight's performance. It wasn't just Cassian and Maribel. His entire family was involved. Her father-in-law, silent yet complicit, sitting there like a stone witness. His friends, smiling awkwardly, but never objecting. The web had been spun long ago, waiting only for her to stumble into it. Elowen suddenly felt like prey in the midst of wolves. But instead of fear, fire surged inside her chest. If they wanted to disgrace her, they would soon face truths they could never anticipate. Around her, whispers rippled. Poor thing, maybe he's right. She looks unwell. But to do this in public? Cruel Elowen bit her lip until it bled. To them, she was pitiful. But she swore they would see a different Elowen. Not a victim, but a woman ready to expose every betrayal. She stepped back, inhaling deeply, and in her mind began arranging the cards still in her hand. The oddities of Cassian in recent months. The nights he disappeared claiming work. The strange slips of paper in his pockets she had suspected. And she had prepared. Her eyes fell on the small handbag hanging from her chairnet. A thick envelope sealed with the crimson crest of Patterson and Wright. Law proof that she had not been blind. Let them think I am weak a little longer. Elowen pressed her lips together. Then I will show them the true strength of a mother cornered. The hall buzzed with noise. But within Elowen, a strange clarity settled. Amid the chaos, she had chosen her path. Not to flee, not to stay silent, but to wait for the right moment to flip the board. The hall roared with chaotic murmurs. Some guests slipped out, unwilling to be entangled in this bitter family drama, but most remained, their eyes glued to the stage as though watching a once-in-a-lifetime tragedy unfold. Elowen stood there, her hands trembling, but her gaze sharpening. She no longer felt like prey. Instead, she felt her blood boiling, every heartbeat urging her, stand up, speak. Now is the time. Cassian was still conferring with his lawyer, ignoring her burning stare. Maribel lingered at the edge of the stage, phone still raised, that half-smile lingering like a knife in Elowen's chest. This was the same friend who had cried with her in their student days, who had promised to stand as her bridesmaid, now siding with the betrayer. Elowen drew a deep breath and stepped to the microphone. Her voice rang out, quivering at first, then gathering steel. Cassian is right about one thing. Today is indeed a day of transparency. But perhaps none of you have yet heard the full truth. The chatter dimmed instantly. All eyes turned to her. Cassian spun around, frowning, his lips pressed tight. Elowen, don't make this worse. She met his gaze, her voice echoing. You want a divorce? Fine, but you don't get to fabricate stories to steal my son. And if you want this public, then let's make it public. Right here, Cassian froze. Maribel's face paled, her finger hovering over her phone screen. Elowen reached into her handbag and pulled out a thick envelope. The crimson seal of Patterson and Wright Law catching the light. She raised it high, her eyes unyielding. You think I saw nothing, Cassian? For months, your late nights, your strange messages. I didn't stay silent. I hired someone to follow you. And here she shook the envelope is the result. Gasps rippled across the hall. Cassian's face drained of color as he strode toward her hand, outstretched to snatch the envelope. But Elowen stepped back, her eyes blazing with defiance. Not so fast, she said coldly. Don't you want everyone to know where you were on October 15th? Or October 23rd? And November 18th? A sharp O burst from the back rows. Elowen opened the envelope and drew out several glossy photographs. There was Cassian side by side with Maribel caught in hotel lobbies at candlelit restaurants. The images were too clear to deny. Here, Elowen declared. Holding the photos high under the lights, Cassian, Dorn, and Maribel Ashcroft, woman I once called my best friend. Those nights he claimed to be working late were spent with her. The hall exploded. Whispers cascaded. Some people scoffed. Others snapped pictures. Maribel staggered back, her face ashen, lips trembling in silence. Cassian's jaw clenched. This is an invasion of privacy. You, Elowen, cut him off, her tone sharp as steel. Don't lecture me about privacy when you planted recorders to spy on your wife. When you twisted my tears into weapons against me, you want to talk law? I have lawyers. And I have the truth. A lone clap cracked through the air. Then another. And another. Not unanimous, but enough to tilt the atmosphere. Faces that once looked at her with pity now regarded her with something else respect. Elowen gripped the microphone, sweeping the hall with her gaze. I won't deny, I cried. I broke down. But that was because I was living with a liar, with a betrayer, with a family determined to erase me. If you call that instability, then remember, sometimes what you call unstable is simply the reaction of a woman pushed to her limit. Cassian surged forward, desperate to reclaim control. Elowen, you're embarrassing yourself. Your no. Her voice sliced through his. The one who should be ashamed is you. The silence was deafening. Cassian stood motionless, fists clenched. Maribel stared at the floor, unable to lift her head. Elowen's hands still trembled, but not from fear. This time, it was the tremor of power, of liberation closing in. She knew the battle was far from over, but tonight she had seized the first strike. The hall swallowed itself into silence after the affair photos were revealed. Cassian stood frozen, his complexion pale though he strained to keep a mask of composure. Maribel hung her head low, clutching her phone with trembling hands as though it could shield her from the piercing eyes around her. Elowen drew in a steady breath. Her heart pounded, but her mind was crystal clear. This was only the beginning. If she was to protect Rowan, she had to go further. She had to tear off Cassian's mask completely. She flipped through the folder in her envelope and drew out several thick sheet-printed records, bank statements, white paper, black ink, cold numbers, but their weight was enough to shred the flawless image Cassian had so carefully built. Elowen, stop this. Cassian lowered his voice, trying to seize control. Don't make yourself more of a spectacle. Her eyes blazed as she turned to him. I'm not making myself a spectacle. You already did that. Then she faced the audience, her voice ringing with clarity. Cassian Dorn has not only betrayed his marriage, he has betrayed his responsibility to his family. For the past 6 months, he has embezzled $85,000 from our joint account, secretly transferring it into another account under the name Maribel Ashcroft. The hall erupted. Gasps, cries of "my God" and "impossible" broke out everywhere. Some raised their phones, snapping photos of the bank statements Elowen held aloft. Cassian lurched forward, reaching for the papers. Give me that. You have no right. Elowen stepped back, her grip firm, her eyes like ice. No right. This is our joint account, Cassian. I have more right than anyone to know where the money went. And thanks to the investigator, I know it sat comfortably in Maribel's account. Maribel blanched. Elowen, it's not what it looks like. I was just holding the money for Cassian, holding it. Elowen's laugh was sharp as glass. Then why transfer it in scattered sums, a few thousand at a time, over months. Why deposit it in your personal account instead of a trust fund or a business account? The crowd broke into feverish whispers. God, it really was a scheme. I knew it. He never cared about that scholarship fund. Cassian's voice rose, cracking with strain. These don't prove anything. They're just statements, not even admissible. Elowen lifted her chin. You can deny all you want, but I've already given the originals to my lawyer, and they know exactly what to do with them. In that moment, her eyes caught her mother's in the middle row. Mrs. Crestfield's face was streaked with tears, but her gaze shone with pride and faith. Warmth surged through Elowen's chest. She was not alone. She turned back to Cassian, her voice unwavering. You say I'm unstable, unfit to raise Rowan. But tell me, between a mother who spends every cent to care for her child and a father who siphons money to fund his mistress, who is truly unfit? Applause burst out, tentative at first, then spreading, swelling into something undeniable. Elowen felt its power rush over her, a shield of invisible armor. Cassian's face flushed crimson as he barked, "This is slander. Elowen, you'll pay for humiliating me in public." But his voice cracked, stripped of authority. And for the first time in months, Elowen felt the power shift into her hands. She didn't retreat to the stage. Instead, she stepped down a few steps, walking past the rows where the scholarship students sat, the children who would benefit from the Dorn Fund. They looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes, some tinged with admiration. Elowen smiled at them, a silent promise. She would not allow this betrayer to use the scholarship's name as a veil for his deceit. When she turned back, Cassian had retreated, fists clenched, his eyes wild with fury and fear. Maribel lowered her phone in a rush. But too late, images of her with Cassian had already spread through the hall, along with the ceaseless murmurs. Elowen gripped the microphone, ending with a voice of iron. You may think you control me, Cassian, but today, before everyone, I want you to know I am not the weak woman you and your allies believed me to be. I am Rowan's mother, and I will fight to the end for my son. Thunderous applause shook the hall. This time, not scattered, but united like waves crashing against the shore. Elowen stood tall, eyes glistening but unbroken. She knew the battle had only just begun. But she also knew, for the first time in months, the scales had tipped in her favor. The applause still thundered through the hall, crashing like waves against the fortress of power Cassian had tried to build. He stood motionless, his face ashen, while Maribel shrank back, clutching her handbag, her expression vacant with shock. Elowen knew this was the moment. If she stopped at photos and bank statements, Cassian could still stall, twist, deny. But what she was about to reveal would reduce all his denials to dust. She set the papers on the podium and slowly pulled from her purse a small phone, its screen already lit with the voice recorder app. The glow reflected off her face, illuminating her steady, unyielding eyes. Cassian, she said, each word deliberate, did you think you were the only one who could use recordings to fabricate? I can record too. The difference is, I didn't cut or manipulate. I recorded the truth. Cassian flinched, stepping forward, his voice sharp. Elowen, don't be insane. You can't. She raised her hand, her voice like steel. You wanted this public. Then listen. Her finger tapped the screen. A second later, Cassian's voice filled the hall, crisp, undeniable. She's already lost control. At this rate, we don't need to do anything more. The court will see her as unfit for custody. Maribel's voice entered next, trembling but calculated. Are you sure? What if she fights back? Cassian's cold chuckle rang out. With what I've collected, plus my parents' support, she has no chance. The money's already in your account. After the divorce, Rowan will be mine. She'll be left with nothing but pity. The hall erupted. Shouts of outrage, gasps of disbelief, voices rising in fury. Some guests leaped to their feet, staring at Cassian and Maribel as though they were the greatest traitors they had ever seen. Elowen stopped the recording, her calm voice cutting through the storm. This is the truth. Not staged tears, not spliced recordings. Their own voices exposing their own scheme. Cassian's face drained of all color. He shouted hoarsely, "That's illegal. You can't use it." From the front row, a man's voice rang out Steven, Elowen's cousin and a lawyer. In this state, only one party to a conversation needs to consent to recording. And since Elowen was present, this evidence is admissible. Applause broke out again. Fiercer, angrier, directed at Cassian. In solidarity with Elowen, Maribel burst into tears and stumbled backward toward the exit. "I didn't want this, Cassian forced me," but no one believed her. Contemptuous eyes followed her, burning holes in her facade as she staggered away. Cassian, meanwhile, looked hollowed out. He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, muttering words no one could hear. The image of the man who had once strode with pride, who had announced divorce as though it were victory, had crumbled into nothing. Elowen stood tall, microphone in hand, her voice resonating like a verdict. "You tried to paint me as unstable. You tried to steal my son. You used my money to fund your mistress. But tonight, before everyone, the truth has spoken. Cassian Dorn, you didn't just betray a marriage, you betrayed your own conscience." Applause thundered like a storm. Voices cried out, "That's right. She deserves protection." Disgraceful. Elowen's eyes found her mother's in the crowd. Mrs. Crestfield was weeping, but now with tears of pride. She nodded at her daughter. A silent blessing. "You did it." Elowen's heart still ached with betrayal, with the weight of months of lies. But above it all, she felt a new strength rising. Strength born of truth, of courage, and of the love she carried for Rowan. Cassian lifted his head at last, his eyes exhausted but burning with hatred. "You'll pay for this, Elowen. I won't let you win." She met his stare, her lips curling into a faint, unshaken smile. "No, Cassian. You're the one who will pay." And in that moment, Elowen knew the legal battles ahead would be brutal. But tonight, she had won the first and most crucial victory, reclaiming her voice, her truth, and her faith and herself. The applause roared through the hall like crashing waves, long and relentless. For a fleeting moment, Elowen wanted to lower the microphone and collapse into a chair, to let the tears flow freely. But then Rowan's face came to her mind, his innocent smile, his wide, bright eyes whenever he watched her read bedtime stories. He was the reason she had to stand tall, the reason she could never again allow Cassian to define her as weak. Elowen lifted her head high. She waited until the clapping died down, then brought the microphone back to her lips. Her voice, this time, was not trembling, but steady, strong. "I know some of you may think this is just a marital dispute, but the truth is, it goes far beyond that. And I came prepared." She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the hall. Cassian sat slumped in the front row, pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Maribel was gone. She must have fled amid the chaos. From her bag, Elowen drew out another envelope, thicker, sealed firmly. The blue court seal gleamed under the lights. She held it up for all to see. "3 weeks ago, I filed for legal separation. The court has already granted me independent control of our home. The locks were changed this morning. Cassian's belongings are in storage, and the fees will be deducted directly from the money he stole from our joint account." A bitter laugh rippled through the audience, followed quickly by encouraging applause. Elowen's tone hardened, steady as a judge reading a verdict. "I also petitioned for temporary custody of Rowan, with evidence of adultery." financial fraud, and emotional abuse, the court has provisionally granted me custody. The formal hearing will be next week, and I trust justice will prevail." Cassian shot to his feet, his voice cracking. You dare." Elowen turned to face him, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, Cassian, I dare. I dare because of Rowan, and I dare because of myself." The air thickened, hushed. Every eye in the hall fixed on her. Elowen inhaled deeply, and for the first time in months, felt like she could breathe fully. "You once thought I was just a small-town teacher busy with chalk and lesson plans. It's too naive to see through your lies. But you were wrong. I've learned to stand up, to protect my son, and to protect myself." She placed the envelope firmly on the podium. Her hand trembled, but her eyes blazed with fire. "I am no longer the Elowen who cowered and cried in the bedroom. I am a mother. And a mother never gives up." Applause erupted again, this time louder, stronger, united. Some people even rose to their feet, honoring her courage. Elowen caught sight of her mother in the middle rows, her hand pressed against her chest. Tears glistening, but her expression radiant with pride. In that moment, Elowen realized something vital. She wasn't only fighting against Cassian. She was showing Rowan and herself that true love never meant blind endurance. She bowed her head slightly in thanks, then spoke again, her voice soft but resolute. "Today, I am not only ending a marriage. I am beginning a new life, the life I choose, not the life forced upon me." Cassian sank back into his seat, hollow-eyed, stunned into silence. His expression was vacant, like a man who had finally realized he had lost everything, not just his wife, but his son and his honor. Elowen stepped back, lowering the microphone. In her heart, she could almost hear Rowan's voice. "Mom, I'm proud of you," and for the first time, after months of deception and fear, Elowen felt truly free. The ceremony ended in an atmosphere entirely different from how it began. At first, the hall had been filled with polite smiles, golden lights, and bright bouquets of flowers. But when people walked out, what stayed in their minds was not Cassian's polished speech. It was the image of a small woman standing tall in the middle of a storm, exposing the truth and defending her dignity. No one remembered Cassian's grandeur. They remembered Elowen Crestfield, the mother, the wife, the woman who refused silence in the face of betrayal. That night, when Elowen returned home, she opened the door with the new key. The house, so familiar, now carried a different breath. There was no trace of Cassian, no heavy cologne he always left behind. Only silence, broken by the ticking of the wall clock. Rowan was asleep in his grandmother's arms, breathing softly, his angelic face flushed with peace. Elowen leaned down and kissed his forehead, relief swelling in her chest. For months she had lived in fear that Cassian would take her son away. But now she knew she had stood strong enough to keep him by her side. Her mother rested a gentle hand on her shoulder, eyes kind. "You did so well, Elowen. You didn't just protect yourself, you gave Rowan a lifelong lesson, that truth and courage always prevail." Tears welled up, but they were tears of release. Elowen smiled through them. "I was so afraid, Mother. But when I thought of Rowan, I couldn't allow myself to tremble anymore." In the days that followed, news of the ceremony spread quickly. Newspapers wrote articles, social media buzzed. Some called it a stunning reversal, others a lesson in a woman's strength. Elowen hardly paid attention. She focused instead on the small things: walking Rohan to school, cooking breakfast, reading him bedtime stories. These simple moments became the foundation of her new life. Her new job at the Educational Legal Center also gave her meaning. No longer the woman quietly confined to a classroom. She now fought for children's rights, standing beside those without voices. Each time she signed a legal document, Elowen felt stronger, as if signing another promise to Rowan. I will always fight for you. Cassian all but disappeared from her life. Occasionally, his lawyers sent letters, trying to negotiate, but Elowen no longer feared his cold voice. With the evidence she had, he would never win custody. More importantly, she understood that in Rowan's eyes, she was his one true anchor, and no court could take that away. One autumn afternoon, Elowen took Rowan to the park nearby. Leaves drifted down in golden flurries, sunlight slanting warmly across the grass. Rowan ran ahead, clutching his battered blue toy car, glancing back with a radiant grin. "Mommy, look at me." He called Elowen, laughed aloud, her heart softening after months of storms. She knew challenges still lay ahead, but this time she walked with steady steps. No longer under the shadow of betrayal. She sat on a bench, watching her son play. Her hand pressed against her chest, feeling a heartbeat now calm and certain. "Thank you, Rowan," she whispered in her mind. "You saved me. You gave me a reason to rise again." The autumn breeze brushed past, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Rowan ran back, cheeks rosy, eyes shining. "Mommy, when I grow up, I'll protect you just like you protected me." Elowen pulled him into her arms, laughing through tears. "I don't need you to protect me, Rowan. All I want is for you to grow up happy, strong, and kind. That will be enough." In that moment, Elowen knew she had stepped fully into a new chapter of freedom, of sacred motherhood, and of a woman rediscovering herself. She lifted her face to the clear blue sky and whispered to the self who once trembled in darkness. Loving the wrong person doesn't make us weak. But daring to walk away to love ourselves, that is true strength. And in the golden light, with Rowan's laughter ringing bright, Elowen felt it deep within her together. They would write a different story now, one of hope, of faith, and of a brand new beginning. Perhaps what lingers after this story is not only the betrayal or the schemes, but the journey of a woman who rose from the ruins. Elowen proved that true love begins with learning to love yourself, and that a mother's strength can overcome even the cruelest of deceptions. Thank you for listening with Snail Story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to share your thoughts.